Nitrogen is used in the plant primarily for the formation of chlorophyll. So how do we know we have enough nitrogen in the plant? What does it look like? It's dark green. That means there's high levels of chlorophyll in the plant, and that's integral to the process of photosynthesis, so dark green color is what we're looking for. What are some of the symptoms then if we think we have N deficiency or not enough green? What does the plant look like? Okay, yellow how? Where? Yeah, I'm hearing bits and pieces, I guess. Between the veins? No, not usually. That's more often some of the micronutrients. Pardon me?
What did he say?
He said between the veins, between the
Older leaves.
older leaves. Okay. Why? Yeah, it's a very mobile nutrient in the plant. So as the plant starts to run short, it's going to translocate in from older leaves into newer leaves. So you'll start to see deficiencies initially on older leaves and on the tips of older leaves. So a very classic N deficiency symptom is an inverted V pattern on lower leaves. It'll be on the leaf margins and the leaf tip. Then you'll see this yellow pattern kind of narrowing in a V pattern as it gets to the midrib on the bottom leaves. This is from one of my research studies here 4 or 5 years ago now. One of our very generous cooperators, and I mentioned a lot of the research that I do is spatial in nature and looking at variability in fields. And to study that, we really need to work at large scales, because if we're working on university research sites that are small in nature, and often those sites are identified for their uniformity, we need instead to go to farmers' fields to get variability and larger scales that we can do our research on. So on this particular site, this is in Merrick County on a sandy site. The farmer let us use about 30 acres of his field to put out field length strips, or he helped us in some of those treatments. So you're seeing an area here that's, I believe maybe that's 24 rows wide, the length of the field that does not have any nitrogen fertilizer. It's a little hard to see, but as we go down the field, do you see this area right here? That's darker green, more N supply to the crop, and that's because of the natural variability that's occurring in the field. Our treatments are the same. You can see on either side of it strips that have higher rates of N fertilizer. But this area right here is pretty uniformly yellow, and if we were to look in detail at the plants, the bottom leaves are particularly fired or yellow in color. But this area right here is mineralizing or supplying more nitrogen to the crop, so it's a little darker green in color. Our purpose in this study, we came in after these initial treatments are applied and used in-season canopy sensing equipment to apply fertilizer according to that variable rate or that variation in the field. So when we use sensors to come in and fertilize this, we would put less fertilizer here because it's darker green than in the areas that are lighter green. I think for the sake of time, I'm going to move on here to just talk a little bit about phosphorus. Phosphorus is the other nutrient that is needed in large quantities and needs a lot of management here in Nebraska. Most of our soils would be deficient in phosphorus to some degree that fertilizer would be needed for most crops. Not all crops and not all fields. But it is a nutrient that if you don't have enough, this is from sub-Saharan Africa, you obviously are going to have really stunted, deficient looking plants. It's very important for energy transfer in the plant. It's a significant component of ATP for energy transfer. This is a photograph, I think Mike, this is Nuckolls County. This photograph, the extension educator sent to me probably 20 years ago now from a trial where a farmer had banded phosphorus on a low phosphorus testing soil versus an area that he did not apply phosphorus fertilizer. So these dark green areas are strips where phosphorus fertilizer has been applied at the time of planting in subsoil bands. Wheat particularly is a crop that will respond to phosphorus fertilization, and so that's what you're seeing here. Our critical levels for phosphorus for wheat are higher than any other crop in the state. A couple of forms of fertilizer that are common in the state: monoammonium phosphate and diammonium phosphate. That basically just refers to the salt that's formed as the phosphoric acid is reacted with anhydrous ammonia in the chemical process in the plant to form these fertilizer forms. Both of these are dry, granular forms that are used by farmers. The most common form that's used today as a dry is the monoammonium phosphate fertilizer. It's 11% nitrogen and 46% phosphate. This is another photograph of, this is phosphorus deficient grain sorghum. That's getting to be pretty rare in Nebraska. Not the deficiency, but grain sorghum is. An illustration of what our recommendations look like for phosphorus. About 6 or 7 years ago, we did, well, a little earlier than that, we had some very in-depth research re-examining our fertilizer recommendations for phosphorus and nitrogen in Nebraska. And this recommendation table resulted from that. And I think with that, I want to stop because I want to just introduce you to a place that you can access our recommendations. Won't take you in depth there. Go to Crop Watch. So if you are looking, if you're not familiar with the site, this is a centralized location for crop management information for the University of Nebraska. It was developed as this web resource about 2 to 3 years ago. So if you have any questions about crop production, this is the place to start, at least in Nebraska. If we scroll down here to the soil management tab, I'll click on that. And that brings up the Crop Watch soil management site. So things that relate to soil management for crop production, the resources that we have should be located here. If I click on the Soil Test Nebraska link, this will bring up the soil test website, I think. So if you are interested, and I guess for the sake of time, I will not go through this in any steps, but it's a way for anybody, a grower or farm operator, a landowner, a gardener, to be able to plug in soil test information and get a recommendation. So for all the agronomic crops that are raised, that we have in Nebraska, you can click on the crop and then enter information that you may have from a soil test, from a soil testing lab, and it will provide a printable version of what our fertilizer recommendations are.
You have it for horticultural crops as well?
Okay, that's just where I was remembering I needed to go, John. No, we don't. That's a gap we need yet to add in gardens and lawns to this. We do have recommendations for garden and lawn use, but they're not accessible yet through this website. Now, it does ask you to log in, so you'll note that there's a registration and login process. The only reason that's there is so that you can build a record of what you've done over time. We're not recording this information or using it for anything, but if you build a soil test recommendation for a field last year and you want to go back and look at it again, you can go back and do that by scrolling down your record on this site.